My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I come from a place most people drive through without stopping. A town where the biggest headlines are about who won the Friday night football game and whether the diner finally changed its pie recipe. A place that smells of motor oil and fresh cut grass, where everyone knows what's under your hood, your car's and your own. When I was a kid, people said I was the smart one. At first, it sounded like a compliment, but in a town like that, it's not. It's a warning. Smart means different. Different means trouble. My father, John Carter, wore his pride like his work shirts. Stiff, faded, and stained with years of real labor. He fixed engines for a living. Big rigs, farm trucks, anything with a heartbeat of steel. He believed in things you can touch, things that fight back when you hit them with a wrench. My mother stayed quiet most of the time, as if speaking too much would tip the balance in a house where silence already had weight. And then, there was Michael, my younger brother, the golden boy, the one who followed Dad's footsteps, then outgrew them. At 28, Michael wears a uniform that makes my father stand taller. The kind of uniform that gets nods in grocery stores, the kind that earns free drinks at the bar. Me? My work can't be worn. You don't pin it to your chest. You don't tell stories about it over beers. I'm not supposed to tell stories about it at all. That's the problem. When I come back here, I become no one. At the family table, I fold myself into something smaller, something easier to understand. I nod at talk about hunting season, football scores, transmission repairs. I smile when they ask if I still work with computers. Computers. As if I fix their broken keyboards in some office basement. I never correct them. I never tell them what I really do, because if I did, the room would go silent in a way no one could stand. They wouldn't believe me anyway. The last time I came home, it was for Michael's wedding. Late summer, the kind of day where the heat hangs in the air like an accusation. The backyard was strung with fairy lights, cheap paper lanterns swaying above a white tent that smelled like barbecue and spilled beer. Laughter rolled across the yard in big, warm waves. I stood in the corner with a plastic cup of something sweet, watching people I used to know grow older, thicker around the middle, louder in their happiness. They didn't see me. Not really. I was the ghost that came back every few years with new shoes and a polite smile. The sister who never stayed long enough to get comfortable, never brought anyone with her. Too busy, they said. Too serious. They didn't know that 2 weeks before, I'd spent 48 hours without sleep inside a secure building 3 stories underground, stopping something that could have killed thousands. They didn't know that my name never appeared in the reports, that I signed my life away to make sure it stayed that way. They wouldn't care. Emily! My father's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He waved me over to the long table where the men sat, laughing too loud. He wanted to introduce me to someone. He always does that. Lines me up like a puzzle piece, tries to see where I'll fit. I walked over, careful, smiling like it didn't hurt. That's when I saw him. A man in uniform, tall, broad shoulders under a jacket that carried weight even when he wasn't moving. He didn't belong to this wedding any more than I did. He didn't look at my father, or my brother, or the food. He looked at me. When he spoke, his voice was low, meant for me alone. Red code. 2 words. That's all. And in that moment, everything stopped. The laughter, the music, even the air seemed to hold its breath. My father saw my face change, and I saw his color drain, though he didn't know why. Not yet. I set my cup down, folded the napkin in my hand into a neat little square, and then I walked away without saying goodbye. The air outside was cooler, but it didn't feel that way against my skin. I walked past the glowing paper lanterns, past the sound of country music leaking out of rented speakers, past a circle of smokers laughing at a joke I didn't hear. My heels sank slightly into the grass, but I didn't slow down. He was already waiting near the driveway, under the edge of the streetlight where shadows stretched long and sharp. The uniform was crisp, but the look in his eyes wasn't ceremonial. It was urgent. "Get in," he said. The black sedan sat with its engine humming low, windows tinted dark enough to swallow secrets. A part of me wanted to laugh. Of course it would be a black sedan. They always are. I didn't ask questions. I opened the door, slid in, and the smell of leather and gun oil wrapped around me like an old memory I wished I could forget. The man, Colonel Gray, though he didn't offer his name, got in after me. The car pulled away, quiet as a whisper, and just like that, the wedding vanished in the rearview mirror. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the tires rolling over cracked asphalt, carrying us deeper into the night. I didn't ask why. I knew. It was always the same reason. Because I'd built the thing that was breaking. Because the locks on the world's most dangerous doors had my fingerprints all over them. And because when those locks fail, the universe gets very small, very fast. He handed me a manila envelope. No markings, no seal. Old school, because the world we live in doesn't trust the digital one anymore. Not for this. Inside were photographs, grainy and printed on cheap paper, like they'd been developed in a hurry. One showed a shipping container, another, a face, blurred, but something in it snagged at the back of my mind, like a thread pulling loose. "They think it's them," Gray said. "Who's them?" He didn't answer, just kept his eyes on the road, jaw locked so tight the muscle ticked. That told me enough. We drove for what felt like hours but was probably less than one. When the car finally stopped, it was in front of a building that didn't belong on any map. A squat rectangle of concrete, no signs, no windows. Just a steel door that opened as we approached, as if the night itself had been waiting for me. Inside, the air was cold enough to bite. Rows of screens lined the walls, flickering with codes and diagrams that would look like static to anyone else. I knew better. "Show me the damage," I said. Gray nodded to a technician who looked like he hadn't seen sleep in days. He pulled up a file, and the moment I saw it, my stomach went hollow. It wasn't just a breach. It was a rewrite. Someone was inside the core, changing things from the root up. If they finished, entire defense grids would collapse. Systems designed to keep millions alive would become weapons. My weapons. And they were using my own algorithm to do it. I didn't speak. Not right away. My fingers hovered over the keyboard and the room fell silent, waiting. They always wait. Like I'm about to conjure a spell instead of math. Maybe they're not wrong. I started typing. Commands, countermeasures, code that felt like part of my own bloodstream. Somewhere behind me, Gray was saying something about stakes, timeline, failure not being an option. I didn't need to speak. I already knew what was on the line. Because here's the thing, no one ever tells you about saving the world. It's not glamorous. It's not music swelling as you push the final button. It's cold sweat, a racing heart, and the sound of keys clacking like a countdown in your ears. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. Who else has access to this protocol? Gray hesitated just long enough to confirm what I already feared. Officially? No one, he said. Unofficially? Someone close. Someone close. I kept typing, but inside something cracked open, because there were only 3 people on Earth who knew the skeleton key to this system. Me, Gray, and the third was a name I hadn't heard in years. And if it was who I thought it was, this wasn't a breach. It was a message. The room buzzed with controlled chaos, monitors glowing with cascading code, voices clipped and urgent, the low hum of servers vibrating like a living thing. But inside my head, there was only silence, the kind that happens before a storm. Someone close. Gray's words rang in my ears like an echo that wouldn't fade. I typed faster, fingers striking the keys with surgical precision. Layer by layer, I peeled back the code. The breach wasn't just deep, it was surgical. Whoever did this knew where to cut. They weren't guessing. They were dismantling my architecture like a clockmaker pulling gears. And then I saw it. A signature buried in the override command. Subtle, almost elegant. Not a name. Never that. But something worse. A phrase only one person would leave behind. For the right hands. My breath caught. It wasn't an enemy. It wasn't a foreign actor. Some faceless hacker in a bunker halfway around the globe. It was someone who knew me. Someone who once sat across from me in dimly lit labs, trading ideas and secrets at 2 in the morning. Someone who believed, like I did, that code wasn't just language, it was power. But that was years ago. That person vanished into the shadows, and I never asked why. Emily. Gray's voice cut through the static in my head. Talk to me. What are we dealing with? I didn't answer. Not yet. I traced the signature deeper, trying to find the anchor point, the location where this digital artery bled out into the physical world. The path twisted through proxies and dead ends, but patterns don't lie. They just wait for someone who knows where to look. And I always know. When the coordinates finally locked, my stomach turned to ice. It wasn't a foreign country. It wasn't a black market data hub. It wasn't even a major city. It was a town with a population small enough to fit inside a football stadium. A town with 1 high school, 1 grocery store, 1 main street. My hometown. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. There was no mistake. The signal originated less than 3 miles from the house where I grew up. Emily. Gray's tone sharpened. Where? I swallowed hard. You're not going to like it. Minutes later, we were back in the car, engine cutting through the dark like a scalpel. My hands curled into fists on my lap as the road signs blurred by. I didn't need GPS for this route. I could drive it blind. Who are we going to see? Gray asked. I kept my eyes on the horizon, though the truth burned at the edge of my tongue. My father, I said. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Paint peeling at the edges, the porch light flickering like it was tired of pretending. Through the window, I saw the glow of a muted television and the silhouette of a man in a worn flannel shirt. Gray waited by the car, but I didn't. I walked up the steps and opened the door without knocking. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face before it hardened into something else. Guilt, maybe. Or anger. Hard to tell in the dim light. Emily, he said, slow, cautious. You're back. I didn't waste time. Where is it? His brow furrowed, the picture of confusion. But I'd played this game too long to believe it. Don't, I said, my voice low, sharp as glass. Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. Something in his jaw shifted. A muscle ticked. Then he sighed and leaned back in his chair like the weight of the world finally settled on his shoulders. You never told us what you do, he said quietly. never trusted us, always secrets, always leaving. This isn't about trust, I snapped. It's about millions of lives. It's about, it's about you. He cut in, voice rising. Always about you. Your big brain. Your big job. What about this family, huh? What about the rest of us living like ghosts while you play hero in the shadows? I stared at him, heat crawling up my spine. You stole classified data, Dad. Do you understand what that means? I didn't steal it, he said, and for a second I saw something raw in his eyes. Fear. I wanted to know what you were hiding. What was worth more than your own family? The flash drive. I could see it in my head, tucked into his calloused hands. Maybe he thought it was just work files. Maybe he thought he could read it like a letter, a diary, something human. You have no idea what you almost did, I whispered. His voice broke when he said, I just wanted to understand you. For a heartbeat, I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, because behind the anger, the betrayal, the operational protocol screaming in my brain, there was a truth I hated admitting. He wasn't wrong. I built walls so high even blood couldn't climb them, but those walls existed for a reason, and now they were cracked. Where is it? I asked again. His eyes flicked toward the mantel. A plain wooden box sat there, small enough to be nothing, heavy enough to be everything. I crossed the room, took the box, and felt the weight of the world in my hands. When I turned back, he was watching me like he didn't know whether to stop me or let me go. You're going back to them, aren't you? He said. Yes. And what happens when they're done with you? I met his eyes. They'll never be done. Outside, Gray was waiting. The flash drive burned cold in my pocket. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to fear. Because if my father could crack my perimeter, anyone could. And whoever wrote for the right hands wasn't finished yet. The flash drive felt heavier than lead. It was small enough to disappear in my palm, but it carried the weight of entire nations, of wars that would never be declared, and lives that would never know they'd been saved or lost. We didn't speak on the way back. Gray kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. Outside, the night stretched endless and black, punctured only by the occasional halo of streetlights. I stared at the blur of cornfields and thought about my father, his voice cracking when he said he just wanted to understand me. Understand me. People think secrets are heavy because they're full of darkness. They're not. They're heavy because they're empty, because they create space between you and everyone else until the distance becomes unbearable. When we reached the facility, dawn was bleeding across the horizon in thin gray lines. The building squatted in silence, colder than the night before, like it knew what we were bringing inside. The command center came alive as soon as I stepped in. Screens blazed. People moved like blood through veins. All eyes flicked to me, not out of admiration, not even fear, but something colder. Expectation. Like I was a tool that better work because if I didn't, the world burned. I slid the flash drive into the terminal. My fingers flew before the system even finished recognizing it. Layers of encryption peeled back like petals under a scalpel. Whoever left that signature had done more than sabotage. They'd set a trap. One wrong line of code and the entire network would collapse like a house of cards. I didn't make mistakes. Hours blurred into minutes, or maybe the other way around. Time is strange when the world tilts on the edge of a blade. Sweat slid down my spine, but my hands stayed steady. Every click of the keys was a heartbeat, every command a breath. Then, I saw it. The trigger sequence buried in a line so elegant it almost looked innocent. Almost. I isolated it, rerouted the failsafes, locked the breach behind a wall no one would ever scale again. And then, for good measure, I burned the blueprint. My blueprint. Because if they could use what I built once, they could use it again. When it was over, I sat back, staring at the dead black screen. The silence in the room was suffocating, then broke all at once. Phones ringing, voices barking updates, someone clapping a hand to my shoulder like I'd just scored the winning goal. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. Gray crouched beside me. His voice was low, almost gentle. You saved us. I didn't answer. Because I didn't save us. I delayed them. And whoever left that message was still out there. Still close. I left the building before the sun was high. No fanfare, no applause. That's not how this world works. Heroes are only heroes when someone's watching. And in my world, no one ever does. Weeks later, I was back in my hometown. Michael's wedding photos were already framed in the living room, smiling faces frozen in time like nothing had ever happened. My father didn't say much when he saw me, just nodded, like a man who wanted to ask questions but was afraid of the answers. Dinner was roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and a silence thick enough to choke on. Then it happened. A knock at the door. When it opened, every muscle in the room tensed. A man stood there in full dress uniform, metals gleaming like shards of sunlight. Colonel Gray. He didn't ask for me. He didn't need to. His eyes found mine, and then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand and saluted. In the middle of my family's worn-out dining room, where the wallpaper peeled and the smell of gravy hung in the air, one of the highest-ranking men in the country saluted me like I was the only soldier who mattered. The room fell silent. My brother froze mid-bite. My mother's fork clinked against her plate. And my father, my proud, stubborn father, stared at me like the ground had just shifted under his feet. Gray said nothing. Neither did I. When he dropped his salute and walked out, the only sound left was the ticking of the kitchen clock, loud as gunfire. Emily, my father whispered, voice rough as gravel. What? What was that? I looked at him, at the man who taught me strength, who feared silence because it held too many truths. He wasn't saluting what I did, I said softly. He was saluting what I carry. He opened his mouth like he wanted to press, but no words came. There weren't any that would fit. Later, when the dishes were cleared and the lights dimmed, I stepped outside. The night smelled of rain and cut grass, and for the first time in a long time, I let the quiet settle without fighting it. I'll never be understood. Not by them. Maybe not by anyone, but that's not why I keep going. Because victory isn't loud. It's not applause or medals or your name in the headlines. Victory is the ability to keep walking when no one knows you're holding